Oh, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome. If it's around 9 o'clock, you know it's time for Lovebabz, Love Talk. I am Babz Rawls Ivy. Good morning. So this morning, I've got folks from the new play that's going to jump off November 21st called Paradise Blue by Dominique Morceau. And I have the director and an actor, one of the principals in the show. Welcome, Awoye.
Thank you.
Timpo.
Yes, that's
She's
right.
the director. And she's in town to give us this beautiful play that's set in Detroit.
That's right, Detroit in 1949.
1949.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm reading some of the press release, and so Miss Morceau is taking her cues from August Wilson in what he has done for Baltimore and telling that century-long story of that particular city. So she has tackled, the happenings of Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's amazing. August Wilson, starting in the 1970s, started to write plays about Black life in Pittsburgh. And over the course of many years, ended up.
That's right, Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, I said Baltimore.
Pittsburgh.
Getting my cities mixed up.
Hopefully, someone will do the Baltimore cycle soon. But he was writing plays for one play for every decade of the 20th century in Pittsburgh, except for Ma Rainey, that's in Chicago. And so Dominique, who is from Detroit, ended up writing a play called Detroit 67 that took place in 1967 in Detroit, and then expanded and started to write a trilogy of plays that take place in Detroit in different time periods. So Paradise Blue is one play in that trilogy, and it takes place in 1949.
Wow.
In a jazz club, yeah.
That's an interesting time.
Yeah.
So Detroit 1949 is a lot different than 1969.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
Something has happened that changed the course of that city.
Yeah.
But 1949, I mean, it really was, I guess the only way to sort of connect it would be like what Harlem was, during the
Renaissance.
The Renaissance.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's really fascinating because during the 1940s and the time that the play is set, Detroit, in this area that's called Black Bottom Detroit, there were over 350 Black-owned businesses. So lots of people were coming up from lots of different kinds of places to work in the car factories, but also knowing that there was this amazing kind of community of Black people in Detroit. And where the place takes place is an area of Black Bottom called Paradise Valley, which had a lot of jazz clubs. And so they had amazing musicians. Charlie Parker, Dizzy, Mingus, people were all coming through to perform in that area. So it was a really, really vibrant cultural time in the city.
So I'm looking forward to this play because there's so much about music that is wrapped in our culture.
Yeah.
Jazz specifically, because we know that jazz is the unique gift that Black folks gave to the world, right? And so to have that undercurrent of music, I mean, will we see that? Will we hear that in this production?
Yeah, and we have a really phenomenal composer on board. His name is Alfonso Horn, and he's created all original music for the show. So you get to see in a couple different places Blue, who Stephen plays. His character is a trumpet player, and you get to see him practicing a couple of his tunes over the course of the play. And then Corn is a piano player. You get to watch them do a duet together. And then Alfonso has created really an entire score for the play that we kind of weave in and out of the piece in different places. So there's a lot of really beautiful, amazing music.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
So hi, Stephen, Tyrone Williams.
Hey, good morning, Babz. How are you?
You are Blue.
That's right.
So tell me about this character and what you like about it.
Let's see. So there's a sense of agency that I think that was really specific to Detroit 1949. Just in terms of the 350 businesses that Awoye mentioned earlier. And there was something really exciting about that, like to have a person who was not only a musician and artist, but also had his own business, which was really interesting to see a character written from that perspective.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, because we don't sort of see that. And so this is touted as a new American play.
That's right.
So what makes it a new American play?
One of the great things about that I think that is beautiful about what we get to do in theater is look at history in a really exciting way, but look also at the places where moments of the past connect to moments of the present. So Dominique just wrote this play. It actually just had its New York premiere earlier this year at the Signature Theater in New York. In a beautiful production directed by Ruben Santiago Hudson.
Oh, okay.
And so it's actually for the most part a new piece of theater. But what makes it really exciting, I think, in this time is the places where we get to see the connections between 1959 and 2018. 1949 in Detroit was a time where the city was really booming and bustling, but because of the the housing laws in Detroit during this time, there were a lot of this is where the Black people needed to live. There weren't opportunities for the Black people in the Black community to live outside of this area of Detroit. And so it started to become overpopulated. And so then the politicians started to also think about, what does it mean for us to be able to take advantage of this area and kind of start to develop urban renewal projects. And so the year after this play takes place, actually a lot of businesses were closed and a lot of people were kicked out of Black Bottom so that they could create an interstate highway, basically exactly where Paradise Valley lives. So it's interesting, in a lot of places, so for example, I live in New York and work in the midst of constant change and evolution, just in terms of what the neighborhoods are, in terms of gentrification, and also looking at what does it mean for laws that are made outside of communities to then affect communities. Mm-hmm. So it has a really interesting and sometimes scary kind of parallel.
You know what? It's very timely.
Yeah, exactly.
Because New Haven has that same history, right? Oh. Whole communities were raised with this hope that they were going to put this highway through it. Now, they put the highway up, but they didn't go through the community that they raised, right? And so now we are still struggling with this idea of gentrification. We've seen New Haven go from predominantly Black businesses downtown to like the drug trade coming in to things shutting down to now it is not Black. And it is thriving. And why didn't it thrive? Like, why doesn't it thrive with folks of color, but why does it thrive when other people come in and invest and do all these things? And so we are having that in real time, a gentrification conversation in this city, in the backdrop of Yale and all those kinds of things. So this play is quite timely. It's amazing how these kinds of plays stand and span the test of time.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, thinking about how it feels like a very specific Detroit story, but because of kind of federal laws that were being put into place during that time. So, for example, there was a Housing Act of 1949 that kind of transformed a lot of things for a lot of American cities. So it feels like it's a very specific Detroit story, also because of, they have the car industry, etc. But it actually is the story of a lot of American cities. And, we talked in rehearsal a bunch about just different cities where everybody's from and the notions of like how much things change even in the cities that we're from. And I remember that you were talking to Stephen about even in places of in Alabama where the city transformed from the time that you were a kid until now.
Sure. Is that where you're from? Sure. Where are you from?
Tuscaloosa, Alabama, by way of Atlanta.
I have a good girlfriend who works for the New Haven Independent. Okay. Who spent some time in Tuscaloosa.
All right, roll tide.
working for the Tuscaloosa newspaper.
Roll Tide.
So wow, this is so when you take on a play, Awoye, what makes you decide to do it? What's your drive? What is the energy around that?
There's a couple things. I think one of the things recently that is really exciting to me is the notion of being able to almost like rewrite history by being able to tell stories. Especially especially our Black history in America has had its own kind of like corruption over time about like who's telling the story, where the story's coming from. And so it's really exciting to be in this amazing moment where Dominique is writing beautiful plays about Black history in America, and to just be able to tell beautiful stories about humanity, who we are to one another, what makes us thrive, what are the things that make our lives complicated or our obstacles that stand in our way. This play is ripe with a lot of history, but it's also these very beautiful, passionate people who have a tremendous drive to get the things that they want. And it's about the moments that some of those desires that they have collide with one another. So it's just a really beautiful story about perseverance and going after what you want and living a dream. So it has a lot of really beautiful themes that were really, really exciting.
So, Stephen, tell me about your thoughts on this play. So when you come to this play,
right,
and you had mentioned it's great agency.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Because that I hear you have done some plays where that has not been in place.
Sure.
Like Native Son. Have you done Native Son?
I have not.
I hate Native Son, but I understand.
What do you think about the book?
I mean, I think Richard Wright was troubled and brilliant.
Sure.
But and listen, I'm one of these people that appreciates that this play ought to be dragged out periodically because we need to remember, and people should have their opportunity to put a different spin or a different lens on it.
Sure.
But it's hard.
It's tough, right? It's tough.
It's a hard one,
tough.
So I'm just curious as when you take on a role, what do you consider?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things, right? Like as a working actor, I mean, I've been fortunate to make a living from doing what I love. And there are very few of us who get that chance. So a lot of times you sort of gauge your, I don't know, your decisions with that understanding that like, I'm very fortunate to be in this position. So there a lot of times it's very tempting to compromise on things that you want to do. Like taking a character that, in some senses may not have the same sort of independence, a character that may be one-dimensional, a character that may sometimes be stereotypical. What's been the hat trick for me is to try to make decisions based on this idea that images have power, and with the understanding of what do I want to convey, what images I want to put out, what images as a little kid would affect me. I try to make decisions based on that. It's tough. A lot of times, you you miss up on great work. You miss up on you miss up on opportunities because of this decision that you want based on the depictions that you want to get. Dominique, like August Wilson, I'd say for me as an actor, it wasn't until I had the opportunity to play characters within August Wilson plays that the rest of the community start to see me in a different way and like, oh, well, he's able to portray this fully developed character. What else can we use him for? You know what I'm saying? But a lot of times, until you're given that opportunity to fully express a fuller developed character, it's hard for people to make that leap from stereotypical to like, let's
like if you a pimp in a play, they only gonna see you as the pimp.
Well, I think it's tempting. You know what I mean? I mean, and just being like completely real with you, like there are times when like you have to pay bills, and you know what I mean. And there's that understanding that like, well, I have to play this pimp. Well, I'm going to do my best to bring as much truth to this character as possible.
Well, Robert Townsend's groundbreaking film, The Hollywood Shuffle,
right,
which still stands today as the truth, right?
He was on something else when he did that, right?
And that's what 30 years ago.
Yeah, it still resonates. And I talk to young actors all the time, and they're like, you know what? Yeah, that's still very real for me.
It is. When I get the calls and and I see the part and it's drug dealer 1, drug dealer 2, pimp 1, pimp.
Sure.
And then they want you to talk a certain kind of way. So, that's got to be, but in 2018, that's got to be daunting.
Sure. I will say this, like there have been changes that have been made. You know what I mean? When Angela Bassett came out, there seemed to be like, she had this like big break, but then we were like trying to figure out now what do we do with her? You know what I mean? Now we have like all these women that have like these fully fleshed out careers.
I mean, Viola Davis.
Exactly.
Which
Angela
has-
Bassett now as well.
Yeah, but you know,
Like,
Viola Davis did Broadway.
Absolutely.
You know, and she was in
Absolutely.
the August Wilson
That's right.
play
Absolutely.
that Denzel Washington is single-handedly,
Yeah.
you know, gonna give us.
Yeah. So you know what I mean? It has changed. I see some of the kids that are coming up now, they don't have the exact struggle that I had coming up.
Mm-hmm.
One of the great things I hear in the actors in the in Black Panther talk, it was like I think Michael B. Jordan said in an interview, he was like, now, you know, kids coming up, they can see that, you know, we don't have to be thugs, we don't have to be like murderers or criminals or pimps. We can be superheroes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like to have somebody at that level to express that struggle that, I mean, that we all have gone through. I don't know, it's something that really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm. So, Awoye, tell me about the women in this play.
Yeah, you know, it's so beautiful because the play has 5 characters,
Mhm.
and there's 3 male characters and 2 female characters, and it's actually really beautiful because they're so different from one another, and kind of just as Stephen is saying, you know, and as we are kind of constantly thinking about what are the portraits of who we are that we get to see on stage or in film or in the popular culture,
Mhm.
but like one of the beautiful things about this play is that you get to see so many different kinds of people. So we have Pumpkin, who's a young woman who's Blue's partner, and she's the person who takes care of basically most of the maintenance of the bar. She does all the housekeeping and the cooking and the cleaning, and she's kind of in the midst of her own discovery because she's discovered the poetry of Georgia Douglas Johnson, and she's a woman she grew up in Detroit. She feels very safe in the environment that she's grown up in and is actually really happy and content where she is. And so there's a lot of different forces coming through Detroit at this time. And she's learning a lot about what the world outside of Detroit might be. And then we have an amazing character called Silver, who's originally from Louisiana, and she comes up to Detroit seeking all these great business opportunities in this time of kind of transformation and change in Detroit. But she's very much a woman of the world. She's very industrious. She's extremely entrepreneurial. She carries herself in the world with a lot of just confidence and is not afraid to kind of stand up to people and to question kind of what the roles of women are in this time period. And so that kind of awakens something for Pumpkin, but it also kind of bristles, and she's ruffling a lot of feathers in the bar, particularly with Blue, because she's kind of making a power play for the place of his business.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not like white folks trying to make a power play. It's within this community that's
Yes,
trying.
and yes, and
Yeah.
Yes,
right?
and yes, and
Yeah,
yes,
the threats
and.
from within and without. You're right. Yeah, it's really interesting what Dominique did.
Yeah.
Right?
It's beautiful. It's like it's really quite complex. And so Blue and Silver have a couple of scenes where they kind of have to navigate this new relationship. But you know, it's really about people wanting to take advantage of different opportunities that are being presented to them in this time. Blue's trying to take advantage of opportunities. Silver's trying to take advantage of the opportunities and, you know, make a new future for themselves. Yeah.
It's interesting that you see a woman who we get to see a woman do that.
Yes.
Like we get to see a woman say, I'm in charge of my destiny, and let me show you some power moves.
That's right.
You know, very Cardi B. Like,
That's exactly right. But it's also, you know, I think one of the beautiful things, like, you know, as you were asking about before, being able to look at the past and being able to look at the present is really interesting, to be able to look at what was the fight for this very entrepreneurial woman at this time, trying to make a moves and trying to be in, I mean, frankly, the moves that she's making, even if it were a man, it still would rustle Blue's feather, because the play is very much about turf. You know what I mean? And a competition over turf. But it's really beautiful to watch her kind of struggle and kind of the things that, because she's this very independent, strong, clear-minded woman? What are the stories that other people in the town and the community put on her to kind of diminish what that power is in her? And what are the ways that she kind of manages that that tension? It's really interesting, because I think we can still see a lot of that today, but we can also see a lot how we've grown as a country.
So talk a little bit about what was happening in the country during this time where this play is situated, because I think that's an interesting sort of time. We're in between, betwixt and between all the social movements. But racism was very, very real.
Really, exactly. And it's interesting because there's we're just 4 years out from the end of the Second World War during this time. We're not yet, it's going to be another 10 years before we really get into the thick of the civil rights movement. I think we're still in a period of people trying to find opportunity, make new life. We're also only 80 years out from the end of the Civil War. And Detroit is actually at a point just beyond, like during and beyond the Great Migration. So we just have a lot of different people moving to different places, trying to make a new life, seeking opportunities. And of course, Detroit was a very specific town because of the car industry that was there at that time. But I feel like it's a time of just massive change. It's like a little identity crisis. I feel like the country is having at this time, just trying to figure out, like, how do we bring people together? Where can people go?
Doesn't it feel very right now?
It really does.
So this play is quite timely on a lot of levels.
It is. And it's also about, what does it mean for there to be forces outside of the Black communities trying to keep the Black communities from thriving, Yeah. Did I forget anything? What else is happening?
I think that was pretty good.
Yeah, I think that was really great.
I thought that captured everything. So talk a little bit about opportunities for playwrights of color and actors of color and directors of color. Are you getting called? How do you maneuver these waters?
No, it's really interesting. It's funny, again, we're talking about the notion of history and the way that we understand history, and the histories that get told and the histories that don't get told. When I think back to kind of the generation above, the generations above Stephen and I, there was a really dynamic, thriving time of Black theater over the course of the 20th century, and really brilliant and amazing companies like the New Federal Theater,
Negro Ensemble Company.
Who were really so much at the forefront of creating amazing, incredible Black plays. There were amazing producers, there were incredible playwrights, there were really phenomenal directors. We're here in New Haven, where Lloyd Richards was the dean of the Yale School of Drama for many, many years.
And that collaboration between him and August Wilson.
That's right.
Which was the beginning of that collaborative effort that took these century plays, all over the country.
All over the country.
All over the world.
All over the world, exactly. So it's really interesting, because it's like we have this very, very vibrant time of Black theater over the course of the 20th century that is really interesting, that I feel like a lot of us, when as we were coming up, actually, depending on where people ended up going to school, there's a lot of that history that actually never reached us, you know what I mean? On a lot of those plays that ended up being forgotten. So interestingly, we're having this kind of new renaissance right now of Black plays, Black playwrights, Black directors. But in a way, it's kind of like almost this new, it's almost like a new cycle that's really just kind of dawned, I think, in the past 10, 15 years.
Do you think that Black plays, do you think that theater houses are open to receiving these new American plays? Because I hear on the other side, these theaters have to keep their doors open too. And so they know the tried and true plays. They want, they know they'll do a Norman Mailer. They know everybody will do a Shakespeare. Everybody will do all these things, but if it's not, Native Son or something else, they don't. Yeah, they're a little hesitant to take a risk.
That's right, and I think that what ended up happening is we for so long had the Black theater community making plays inside of our own community, and then we had the white theaters. I'm saying the white theaters, but the theaters that are owned by with mostly white boards and with white artistic directors, and for so long were only doing white plays. And then over the course of the 70s and 80s, with the dawn of all these amazing August Wilson plays, those became the plays that people would do over the course of their seasons. And then people would kind of pocket those plays into the February slot. So during Black History Month, they would pop out with one play that was usually either an August Wilson play.
No, you're absolutely right.
You know? Yeah. It was either an August Wilson play or it was a Lorraine Hansberry play. So I think that now what's starting to happen, you know? And so now what's starting to happen is I think that there's been a lot of conversation over the course of the past 10 years, certainly with no small jolt from the presidency of Barack Obama, and people really looking at what does representation mean inside of institutions. So this is my long Black history seminar, but but like this, like really looking at the moments of change, because this moment that we're in right now is really a reflection of all the stuff that's been happening over the 10 years. And as theater started to say, we need to make sure that we started to get a push to make from Black artists and other artists of color to make sure that those theaters are more inclusive. People started producing more and more plays by writers of color. And also there's a really big push recently for lots of playwright development opportunities. So, you know, it's funny. It's like I think a lot about like what the pipeline is, right? So at the Public Theater about 10 years ago, they started something called the Emerging Writers Group. And Dominique was she was in one of the first years of the Emerging Writers Group. And the Public has a thing called the Public Studio. And so they did a production of Dominique's play, Detroit 67. This is also just happens to be around the same time that Katori Hall is doing a production of Mountaintop in London that gets transferred to New York. So it's like, there's like,
and we
start
saw
to
it here.
Brew.
There's a little theater group called Collective Consciousness Theater.
Yeah.
And they've done To the Mountaintop.
Okay.
So they've done
amazing.
it. And I think they did 67 too.
Okay.
I think they did that. So
yeah.
So and they were here. Dexter and his team were here.
Oh, cool.
And we were talking about that because they have a play running right now.
Okay.
Jesus Hopped the A Train.
Oh yes. So the Geargis. That's great. Yeah. But it's an amazing time right now though. There's a lot of Black plays by Black playwrights getting produced. Which is really incredible, you know? Yeah.
Right.
So do you think it's worth our while? And I think it is, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Do you think it's worth our while to sort of take these Black plays, whether they're old or new, and try to get them into these so-called larger, wider audiences, rather than producing them in places where we are?
I think actually this is actually a conversation we have so much right now, and I actually think that I think that we need both tracks at the same time. I feel like there is a quote unquote fight sometimes to get these plays produced inside of the white institutions, and I think that it's because those are our major institutions. I think it's worthwhile for us to have the conversation about what does equity and diversity and inclusion look like inside of those institutions, but not for a second do I think that should eclipse making sure that we're making new institutions also that are really, really strong and can bring together all of the excellence that we have on our own inside of the Black artistic and management community, and making plays and supporting our own institutions to make them great and amazing. So I think both things can happen at the same time, because also there's so many wonderful and amazing plays, and the larger institutions have a lot of populations to kind of satisfy. And so I feel like we have more than enough plays to also have our own institutions inside of our own communities.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like I think it's both things actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you just tuned in to Lovebabz Love Talk, I'm here, Babz Rawls Ivy, sitting here with the director, Awoye Timpo, of the play that's going to be at Longworth Theater, Dominique Morrissey's Paradise Blue, which runs from November 21st through December 16th. So she's here. Awoye Timpo, the director, and actor, one of the principals in the show, Stephen Tyrone Williams, who plays Blue in the play. This is a good conversation, because I don't think we have these big enough conversations around in arts communities. I don't know if the Black conversation is the conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, you can probably feel a difference too in terms of the kind of roles that that you get called in for too,
Sure.
different than how they were 5 years ago, right?
How long have you been an actor?
Wow, 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
So you've seen change.
Yeah, I
Good, bad,
yeah.
otherwise.
Well, look, I mean, I have seen it to where it was really tough. Just speaking, I mean, fortunately, those 20 years, I've been blessed to make a living from acting. I just want to say that off the top, right? But like,
and the fact that you look 20.
hey, I'll take it. I will take it.
Hello.
I'll take it. So just the idea, like working for those 20 years and then having the struggle just in terms of like finding representation, just in terms of like the characters that you would like to play, and then to watch how that has become a reality. To see the product of the struggle actually start to become like, no, that's not new. That's not even deep. It's just like, you know, just take the label off, and would you want to portray that? Would you want your child to emulate that?
That's
you know
pretty
what I
bold
mean?
for an actor,
Hey.
right? Because they hire you to come in and do something.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like you have an opinion? Sometimes, maybe, often.
Well, when I'm asked for an opinion, that's when I give it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's how we all should be, right?
Hey, I'm just, you know, that's how I was raised. Right? Other than that, I come in, I hit my mark, and keep it moving. You know what I mean? But like, I think all of those things should be worked out before you actually get to the actual project. You know what I mean? So if there's some things that, you know, that you have some reservations about, I think all of that should be taken care of before day one. So if you choose to do it, you know what I mean? Do it.
So do you have any quote unquote, I won't do that kinds of things in your spirit about what you will do for a part?
So listen, it's a great question. It's a great question.
When they make these movies and films that are not in our best interest, and they have black people, somebody had to make the decision to be in that production.
Listen. So it's so funny that you would say this. So I was just getting started in New York City, looking for a big break, and my manager calls me and he's like, "Steven, you have they want you to come in for this job, but they're really interested in you for the project. He's like, I'm gonna shoot you over the script. Read it and tell me what you think." So I get the script and I read it. So I'll just say this, that in context, like I grew up in a household full of women, strong black women, right? So I read the script, and like literally one of the first scenes, a black woman is literally being drugged through the mud, right? Like, I mean, that's the scene. And I'm reading it. My character doesn't participate in it, but like the first thing I think about is like, I know for a fact that my family members probably wouldn't see this movie if I wasn't a part of it. But if I am a part of it, they're going to see it and they're going to watch that. So I'm like thinking about it, because it's like, it's a game changer in terms of like just how visible the role would be. You know what I mean? And so I'm thinking about it. And I go to my manager. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pass. He's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to pass. And like, there's a part of me that was sort of like, you know what? Just thinking about, you know, that other path. I'm like, but it's good. You know what I mean? Like my family members, the women in my family, they will not be subjected to it. And I don't tell them. And come Christmas, I go home and my sister's like, oh, have you seen such and such movie? It was great. And I was like, you saw it anyway.
Like, I could have been in that.
It's like, what?
I'm trying to spare y'all.
It's like, man. But no, seriously, it's real. And I think it's like, not to pass judgment on anybody's decision in the past, you know what I mean? Because everybody has to live with the choices that they make. And like, I can't judge anybody unless I walk in their shoes. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I have to be okay with not only cashing a check, but like that residual actor effect, what happens in terms of after you put those images out there. Yeah.
So what you tell me about what do you think of these upstart plays that you know Tyler Perry does? And folks like Tyler Perry, you've seen these plays,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
Where they have real talk back, and
Yeah,
people
totally.
are.
You know, it's so interesting. I feel like I feel like there's so many artists who have stories to tell. And I think actually, you know, because we have like, there's a debate about Tyler Perry, right? And so my feeling about Tyler Perry and Tyler Perry's work is how I feel about actually all artists. Like we all have the agency to make and create stories.
That's how I feel too.
You know,
Right.
and whatever
I don't go
way
see
we
them,
choose.
but I get it.
Exactly.
Sure.
And I feel like
Sure.
I think that really our conversation around Tyler Perry actually isn't about Tyler Perry. It's about how many
Yes.
plays and how many films do we have access to that
Yes.
represent our stories. And when we are, I think that the thing that happened in the Tyler Perry era, especially that, you know, in the past decade, let's say like from 15 years ago to 5 years ago, before we had this plethora of other things coming up, is that in a way, Tyler Perry's voice was like the main voice. And so I think that a lot of people had an issue because we're thinking, oh, is that how, like, that's how we're all going to be represented? But it's like, there's a great audience for Tyler Perry's plays.
Sure.
We love Tyler
But
Perry.
he caters to an audience where other people don't.
Right.
Yeah,
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like that's
And
a different.
he's telling the truth inside of he's telling the truth of his story. And I actually think that's something really beautiful to celebrate. And I think the thing that we should all learn from Tyler Perry is he was actually a really brilliant and relentless producer. He said, this is the kind of play I want to make. This is the audience that I want to reach, and I'm going to make that happen. So he became a great businessman for the kind of work that he wanted to make. And I think that the conversation of Tyler Perry is really about, what are the places that we can learn from the things that Tyler Perry did, but it also shows the kind of danger. You know, there's a great what is it? It's like a TED Talk that Chimamanda and Adichie.
Danger of a story.
Yeah,
a single
the danger
story.
of a single story. And I think our challenge is, what does it mean for us to think that we all have to live inside of a single story? It's what Stephen's talking about in terms of, like, you know, the acting opportunities that people had over the course of the 20th century. It's like people are trying to singularize what the Black story is, but it's not true.
Yeah.
And so that's
I love that you said that.
You know, so it's like the thing that we're really fighting for is not against Tyler Perry. It's not against having characters who are pimps or, you know, who are addicted to drugs or whatever those things. Those things are true things inside of our society.
Right.
It's making that so it's not the only story
only
that
story.
we see.
Yes.
You know, and that's the beauty, I think, of this moment that we're in right now, is that we're getting to see lots of different kinds of stories, because you can bring a great humanity to someone who is a pimp or a drug dealer. It's a real human American experience.
Listen, my favorite play is A Raisin in the Sun.
That's a perfect play.
It still for me resonates the human condition of family and who decides and all those kinds of things.
Exactly.
So it's still for me one of my favorite plays.
Yeah. I think that the thing that we're all looking for is the complexity of our experience.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's really the thing that we're fighting over. It's not really a fight over one story or the other. And it's not to say that only Black people can tell true stories about who we are. Do you know what I mean? But it's that we want our stories to be true. We want our stories to be representative. We want to see ourselves. We want to see our aunts and our uncles and our grandmothers. You know, we want to see ourselves true.
Right.
And I think the challenge of American history is that it is built upon telling us who we are as a lie. And so really this moment too is also about a reclamation of exactly who we are through our own voice, through our own storytelling, inside of our own institutions. Like that's the moment that it's like a reclamation moment. And so when I was talking in the beginning about what does it mean for us to be able to rewrite history, like that's the thing that this play gets us to do. It gets us to say, this is who we are. This is who our aunts and uncles were. This is who artists were in the late 40s. Do you know what I mean? So we can see ourselves inside of what they were doing, you know, now nearly like 75 years ago. You know, the thing we're looking for is truth. And I think that's the thing that we want to engage with as artists, as audience members, and wherever we can find that truth is
because when I listen to when I see this play, I'm going to think about relatives who are at this age, because now they would be in their late 70s, right?
That's right.
So I would get a glimpse of what they were like in their day,
Back in the day,
right?
Really cool
The
take.
music
That's
and the
a
way
really
they
cool
look, the way
take.
they talk.
Well, listen,
you know?
the costumes.
Yes.
If they dress the way this costume department has costumed us, you need to get photos.
Yeah, we have an amazing. I mean, the whole team is really amazing. But our costume designer Lex Liang, is really brilliant and just so specific.
And that's
Clean.
important because I want.
Clean,
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
You know what? People of color, Black folks
Come
in
on.
particular, you know how we do.
We're not messing around.
You know how we do. You
Listen.
know how we do. So, listen, if you all want to see this play, and I'm inviting everyone to go see this play, go over to the Long Wharf Theater and get your tickets. They start at $30, which is unbelievably reasonable.
It's great.
I mean, you know, that's 2 drinks in New York.
That's right.
Or like,
Or
maybe
one.
a drink and a half.
That's right.
So you go over to Long Wharf, or go online, longwharf.org, get your tickets, or call them at 787-4282. Long Wharf Theater presents Dominique Morceau's Paradise Blue, which runs from November 21st through December 16th. And it'll be a wonderful. I'm coming press night.
Great.
To see it.
All
So.
right.
And you all will be at the Stetson Library doing artist in conversation with Ife Guardian, who y'all met. And so it'll be a continued conversation.
Beautiful.
With the community, sitting with community in the Stetson, which is in the heart of our Black community.
That'll be amazing.
So you'll love it. It'll be a wonderful conversation, and people will embrace you, and that'll be nice. And I'm glad that they're doing that. And high five Elizabeth Nearing and to Steve Scarpa over there at the Long Wharf Theater.
Yay,
It's been my pleasure talking to y'all.
Thank you. You too.
I hope I see you
Pleasure's
again.
Yes, absolutely.
And to your success, all right?
Thank you so
Con.
much.
Thank you, Harry. So you'll love it. It'll be a wonderful conversation, and people will embrace you, and that'll be nice. And I'm glad that.
she said that she do